BBC 5 Live.
I am a football fan, I am a soccer fan. I come to see da-da-dum, ba-ba-da-ba-ba-ba. Oh, are we on? That's more like it. The real sounds of Africa there to once again kick off our world football phoning. So this morning we're talking football in North and Central and South America. 08085 909 693 is the number to call if you'd like to join in the fun and games. 08085 90693. Pick up the phone and give us a call. We're talking football in the MLS, North America, in Central America, in Mexico and the Caribbean, the CONCACAF region, with our own Neymar, Jon Arnold, who is where this morning? Where are you, John? Where are you?
In Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. And the Legendino, as ever, is in Rio, taking care of any questions you've got on South American football and players from over there playing our leagues. Tim Vickery, good morning.
Good morning, hope everyone's well, and I hope, John, that BBC Wales found you, because they got in touch with me. There is a forthcoming friendly between Wales and Panama, and they wanted to know all about Panama. And I said, well, you know, not really my region. I'm not your man. If you want to do it right, do it with Jon Arnold. So I hope they found their way to you.
That's nice.
And obviously any 10% commission that might be going.
No, hang on a second.
I renounce it.
Yeah,
I renounce my 10% commission.
You've never done this to me. After all the years we've known each other, you've never once done. You've never passed any work on to me. Thanks very much for that. You know, you enjoy it, John, and give him 10% and leave the other 50. Something percent for me that you've got left over. Anyway, this is for you, gentlemen. This is from Sam, who says, Dotun and the gang. It's the second time that I'm emailing in, so I'm hardly worth a Brazilian shirt name just yet, but I've got a new job.
Unlike Anand in Delhi.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll come on to that. No doubt Anand will be calling, demanding his football shirt name. Anyway, I've got a new job, talking of jobs, and it's football related. I'm working in the media team for a Premier League football club, and I was wondering if any of the pundits on tonight's show had been particularly impressed with any social media or online content from specific clubs in their region. So which club in your region, John, first of all, has a particularly impressive social media or online presence?
This is one thing where MLS just excels. A lot of the clubs are really good. I was really impressed this year with Atlanta coming from nothing and having some really interesting, videos and cool ways to present things. I think the Sounders and Seattle have done a very good job. It's something where almost any MLS team, I think this is an area where, competition is great because you see other people doing cool things, connecting with fans, and it gives a good idea. There's something I was tweeting about earlier this week because the German national team in Spanish wished Mexican fans a happy Dia de los Muertos, a celebration of ancestors who have passed on. The Mexican national team is big business, as we've talked about in the United States. I make my living writing about them in English, but they don't have an official English account yet. It's very fascinating to me to see which clubs put a priority on this, and it sounds like, looking to other clubs for an example is a step in the right direction.
Tim?
Yeah, rather like John's saying there, in terms of like an international, a global approach, we're in the dark ages here, just staring at your own belly button, where, the Europeans have really got ahead in terms of a global reach. One club that I think has done some good campaigns is with its fans is Corinthians in Sao Paulo, and they are a club with their own kind of sweat and sacrifice type ethic anyway. And they had a campaign a few years ago where you could just buy a little photo of yourself on the shirt So the shirt was made up, and it still looked from a distance. It still looked like a white Corinthian shirt, but you look very closely, and it was made up of thousands of photos of the fans. And I thought that was a really, really good idea, because at the end of the day, the shirt represents the fans. That's what football is all about. That shirt is representing the fans, and to have that as a marketing concept, I thought was really interesting.
Okay, and this is from one of our listeners who says you're going to love this, Tim. This is from Kieran in Sydney, Australia. And I know it's your favourite game, Football Manager, the computer game. The latest edition was released last week, and with it, a lot of potential wonder kids in the game. As expected, there are many South Americans and a few from North America, as most people will be aware of the likes of Real Madrid prodigy Vinicius Jr. from Brazil and Christian Pulisic of Dortmund and USA. Could John give his thoughts on another American on the list called Tyler Adams? And could Tim tell us about an Argentinian on the list called Kevin McAllister, and any other stories behind his name? So, John, first of all, who is this Tyler Adams kid?
Yeah, Tyler Adams is a really bright prospect in the United States. Came up in the Red Bulls system and has been playing first-team minutes all season, really, for the Red Bulls. They're in the playoffs right now. He can sort of do it all. He's played in the midfield. He's played at fullback as well. Just his sort of, I think his vision is really good, his passing, and it's something that Americans, of course, as we talked about on the last show, when you don't make the World Cup, you start to look at who's next, and he's a guy who people were already starting to think maybe in October or in the previous FIFA window maybe should have been getting a look. So he's only 18, still got some time, but definitely a guy who I'm not surprised that his stats, his potential numbers are big for Football Manager. I think they're quite big in real life as well.
So you lot have got a lot of time in your hands for the next 4 years or so. You've got a lot of time in your hands.
I don't personally, but there's plenty in the United States Federation.
Your president seems to have a lot of time in your hands. Do you think if you'd made it to the World Cup, he'd still have as much time to tweet?
I'm not sure. I saw that someone closed his account down for a few minutes.
Yeah, only for a few minutes, and that was a malicious closure as well. I understand as well. Somebody who was leaving the job in Twitter decided to.
Maybe that's a rogue U.S. soccer fan who said, you know what, I have nothing else to do this summer. If I'm locked away in jail or something, well, so be it.
I know it's not the case in South America, Tim. You got your hands full ahead of the World Cup, haven't you?
Certainly have, yes. Yes, certainly have. It's when all the bills get paid. Kevin McAllister, I believe, I've never seen him play. I think he's a right back. But I believe he's the son of Carlos McAllister. There is a whole dynasty of footballing McAllisters in Argentina. I think Carlos McAllister, who is the sports minister. He played a few times for Argentina. He was a fair left back who very nearly went to the 1994 World Cup. I think it was at Boca, and he played a Super Classico against River, and River just tore him to pieces, and that was the end of Carlos McAllister's chances of going to the World Cup. But I think he's even set up a football team for McAllisters, something like McAllister United or something like that. So you wonder a little bit with his son Kevin if he's getting some first team time because of his dad's connections. I'm not saying he's not going to be anything, but it's obviously a little bit early to know. But I think that the McAllisters, it's either Ireland or Scotland that they trace their roots back to. And Argentina is, of course, a society of immigrants. And as a great Latin America writer once put it, the Mexicans descended from the Aztecs, the Argentines descended from boats.
Rarely has an email reduced me to tears, but this one, from Shane in Saskatoon, in Saskatchewan, in Canada. It's so moving, and even as I read it now, I have to fight back the emotions. He says, I've been listening to the podcast for 8 years now. This is a wonderful show. It's gotten me through some tough medical history. I had a liver transplant at 21 years old. The same month as Eric Abidal, which was motivation for me. Anyways, I had a question about managers riding one revolutionary tactical insight and really not doing much after that. Similar to a one-hit wonder in music, if you like. My first idea was Jürgen Kleipeder and Gegenpress, I don't know, and the Gegenpress, which proved wildly. And the Gegenpress, which proved wildly successful for him, but he doesn't seem to have developed or had an alternative. He is still seen as a world-class manager. Do you think managers like him will be remembered or considered fondly with only having had one good idea that changed football, or simple a one-trick pony? And are there any others from your region that are considered world-class off one idea, Tim? You know, managers who had one great idea but didn't seem to go beyond that one great idea.
I think rather have one great idea and really make an impact, however short it is, than just be a kind of mediocre who gets by as a pragmatist year by year by year. Quite often, I think that, and there are lots of people with kind of one great idea, and Bielsa is a little bit of a one-trick pony, and isn't doing particularly well at Lille at the moment. But there are a few coaches more influential than that Argentine, who's influenced the career of hundreds of coaches, and especially Pep Guardiola. Other people have perhaps been able to interpret Bielsa's high press, full intensity, create 2 against 1 situations down the flanks at all times and leave yourself open to the counter-attack. Other coaches have been able to interpret that with perhaps a little bit more pragmatism, and he has done it almost with a kind of adolescent purity over the years. But he will go down in history, I think, not for the titles that he's won, because there haven't been that many of them, but for the careers that he's influenced. That's a pretty good way to go down in history, I think. Also, I think another one is if you look at coaches who've won the World Cup, and I'm thinking more of when the World Cup was the football competition. The World Cup still has its magic, but it's no longer the barometer of absolute quality, which is nowadays it's found in the Champions League. But it used to be the case when you looked to World Cups for tactical innovation and the highest quality football rather than the club game. And you look at a lot of coaches who won the World Cup, and they really paid a price for it. A lot of them didn't do a great deal afterwards. And my favourite example of this is Menotti. Cesar Luis Menotti, who won the World Cup with Argentina in '78, is still around as a great footballing philosopher, and when he talks, you shut up and listen. But really, after that '78 World Cup triumph, and he worked here and he worked there, didn't really do a great deal. And I've got a book of his that he wrote about, how he won the World Cup in '78, and he took over the Argentina job in '74. And obviously, it was a very, very stressful time to be coach of Argentina, especially if you're a left-wing pavement cafe philosopher, because, he took over the job in '74. In '76, Argentina is taken over by a rabidly violent dictatorship that kills 30,000 of their own people. And so it was difficult for a left-winger to still be coach of the national team at that time. But the really striking thing is, and Menotti himself puts these photos in for exactly that this reason. He puts a photo of himself in 1974 when he took the job, and in 1978 after they've won the World Cup. And in those 4 years, he has aged 20. Now, it's a little bit like an American president, sometimes you see that, the burden of responsibility. Our own Alf Ramsey, didn't do a great deal after the England job, didn't work that much. Yeah. And you can see that with a number of World Cup winning coaches. And Ramsey, who was so instrumental in 4-4-2. And after he left the England job, I remember a little bit at Birmingham, but I don't really remember him doing very much. So I think a lot of the coaches who went through the strain of winning the World Cup also didn't do a great deal afterwards.
Is it fair to describe Jurgen Klopp as being a one-trick pony in that sense with his, Gegenpress, the press? I know you haven't seen a lot of that, of his football.
Yeah, that's really not one for me. I'd rather not judge someone's work on the basis of I haven't seen enough of it.
How about you, John? Are you prepared to judge his work on this criticism?
No, but I do think that Tim makes a great point that often maybe the glory of these managers who do come up with these revolutionary ideas comes when the coaches that are truly transcendent and great and win championships, when they're interviewed and say, I learned this from this guy who came before me, I took his style and built upon it. The guy who comes to mind for me is an Argentine who spent almost all of his life, I think since the 80s, coaching in my region, be it in Mexico or he was at the Costa Rica national team for a bit. It's Ricardo La Volpe, who, plays a very strict style and doesn't modify it. Sort of was one of the first managers, in my understanding at least, to play 5 at the back and then stretch out the center backs by having the midfielder in the middle dropping back between the center backs to allow the fullbacks to push up, to allow the center backs to spread out and get more width. That was sort of his bread and butter idea, and one of the first to do that. He still does that, and now everyone expects it, right? They know exactly what to do against a La Volpe team, but you've seen disciples of his spread all throughout Mexico, including Miguel Herrera, who took Mexico to the last World Cup, and have success and build off of that. So I think a lot of times maybe that's where the managers come from, and if that's their legacy, I assume that if you ask most, this will be your legacy, that someone was able to do better than you with your tactic, but still gives you the credit, still was influenced by your ideas. I still think that would be a beautiful thing. So I think of La Volpe and how others have built on that style to make even better football, and perhaps we'll see the same thing with Klopp going forward, or maybe he'll end up being a title-winning manager himself.
And best wishes health-wise to Shane. It really is humbling to hear how this little program of ours has managed to give somebody to see them through some tough medical times. Anyway, let's speak to Ben in Auckland, in New Zealand. Good morning, Ben.
Good morning, gentlemen, and good afternoon from the exotic climes of Mount Roskill in Auckland, New Zealand.
Okay, you've done the sell. We feel even worse than we felt a moment ago. So tell us a bit about it.
I'm booking my ticket.
Yeah, I know.
I'm booking my ticket already.
Yeah, take me with you. Take me with you. But tell us something about the place, Ben.
Take me to New Zealand. Take me to New Zealand.
I knew you were going to do that. Tell us something about the place, Ben. Now that you've phoned up and you've championed its assets, what can you tell us about where it is?
Well, about Mount Roskill, where I am now.
Yes.
Yeah, it's really just a suburb of Auckland, and Auckland. One thing about Auckland is there's a couple of odd geographical things about Auckland. One is that we're an isthmus, which means that we've got 2 oceans, sort of either side, that are separated by a very small amount of land. And another thing is that a lot of New Zealand is very volcanic, so Mount Roskill is actually quite a sort of an overglorious name for what's really just a little pimple of a volcanic peak. But once upon a time, it was spitting out a whole bunch of volcanic rock long before there was any human beings here.
But it's beautiful, yeah?
Well, I love it. I mean, and other people seem to as well, so it seems to be.
Thank you for telling us about it. And we'll all be booking our tickets there, so you might have to put us all up at the same time. But until then, you've got a question for both John and for Tim. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's actually mostly pointed towards Tim, and he might even be able to guess what it is, being calling from New Zealand only a week before
I think I can, yes.
The national football team of Peru, of course, will stride out of the visitors' changing rooms and onto the hallowed pitch of what we call the Cake Tin in Wellington, the stadium in Wellington. Of course, it's our capital city, and unfortunately, for Peru, that Cake Tin pitch is going to be a pitch on which their dreams are going to be shattered into tiny little pieces by the might of this unstoppable. So I'm just trying to keep a straight face. Our football colossus of New Zealand. So really, a couple of hours ago, maybe 4 or 5 hours ago, Paulo Guerrero was suspended for 30 days for a failed PED test, I think, or doping test. And so really I was just going to try and see if Tim could tell us what sort of impact that would be and what he thinks are the chances that Peru is going to lose this two-way fixture by fewer than 4 goals on aggregate.
Peru are not taking New Zealand lightly, and even with Paulo Guerrero. They watched New Zealand in the Confederations Cup, and they noticed that New Zealand were leading Mexico at half-time. And they saw that New Zealand can play some football. It's not just big ugly men football. No, there's is it the coach? Is Tony Hudson? Is that his name? There's an attempt to add some football to their game as well, and they were quite impressive, I think, in little bits, especially the first half against Mexico. So Peru are not taking them lightly at all, and Peru they're on the verge of a nervous breakdown about this anyway. They haven't been to a World Cup since 1982 when New Zealand were there also. In recent times, they haven't really got close, and they didn't look like getting close this time, but they really picked up momentum towards the end of the campaign. They went more than 10 years without winning a World Cup qualifier away from home. So that was their big problem. Their away record was an absolute disaster, which tells you that there is, I think, a lack of mental strength in the team. They would concede the first goal away from home, and they would collapse. Now, they've got a group of players. Ricardo Gareca, the Argentine coach, has given them a sense of calm, and he's found a group of players and he's stuck with them. And I think that calm has been absolutely vital, and that has helped them with this emotional hoodoo of away games. But Paulo Guerrero is probably their one truly world-class player. He's a great centre-forward, a really great centre-forward. He'd be better known had he not suffered so many injuries. He was in Germany for 10 years with Bayern Munich and with Hamburg. Suffered a lot of injuries, and that's why he ended up going to Brazil, where his fitness record isn't great, but it's been much better. And Guerrero is such an interesting centre-forward because he's so good at holding the ball up back to goal. Really good at it. It's very, very hard to get the ball away from him. He's physically strong. He's technically very good. He's also, although he's 33, he's quick enough to be played in behind the defensive line, so he can stretch you that way as well. And Peru don't really have a replacement. And they don't have a lot of practice of playing without him. And he only missed 2 games of the 18 rounds in World Cup qualification. So in kind of technical terms and in emotional terms, losing Paulo Guerrero, if this provisional suspension is ratified, Peru still hope that it can be cleared up. That maybe this is a flu medicine, and there could be the documentation could be in order, but it's looking a little bit of a thin hope. But it's a real problem for them because they don't have a centre forward replacement. They could play Jefferson Farfan up there, but he's much more of a wide striker. Really, he's a front to goal striker who cuts in at pace. Raul Ruiz-Diaz, Mexican-based striker, has a personality, but he's a quick little striker, more than a target man. So Guerrero is a player that they can't really replace, and he's someone that they derive so much confidence from his presence on the field. Also important in defending set pieces, because New Zealand have some big players, and they throw in a mighty throw-in as well, not just the corners. You know, they've got a throw-in there that they can get in right into the penalty area, and Guerrero would be important defensively against the set pieces as well. So this is a real blow for Peru. Perhaps you can help me out, Ben. News on Chris Wood and Winton Reid. New Zealand's centre-forward and centre-back, 2 of the leading players in their side. Injury doubts, do you reckon they'll be ready in time?
I don't have any more insight than what you might be seeing on the news wires. I mean, we're just knocking on wood and crossing all our fingers, and knocking on wood, that was an accidental pun, but you know, we're just crossing everything we can so that those boys will be ready, because as important as Guerrero is to Peru, those are our 2 both our talismans and our 2 leaders. So yeah, we definitely want them around. And that this Peruvian thing is a little bit of a double-edged sword, because that 1982 World Cup that you mentioned was my first World Cup. I was 7 when that happened, and it was the one that really turned a lot of New Zealanders from being only rugby fans or rugby and cricket fans into following football as well. And that Peru being at their World Cup was, when you're 7 years old, you don't know a lot of countries, and one of the great things about football is it can teach a young kid a lot about geography. So I learned all about Peru and Honduras and El Salvador just because of that World Cup. So I was hoping they would get into that top 4 and we wouldn't have this situation where I want them to qualify, but I don't want them to qualify at our expense.
Thanks for the call, mate. Ben, make sure you call anytime you want to. You'll be pleased to know you're not the only person that has been asking that question, actually. Carl says, what does Tim make of the situation Paulo Guerrero got himself into? And that's interesting. He got himself into that situation. More about
a footballer is responsible for what goes into his body. So even if a club doctor has given him something contaminated, it's a footballer's responsibility, which often seems a little bit harsh to me. Well, there you go.
Well, okay. 08085 909 693 is our number. We're talking football in America, North and South and Central. Pick up the phone and give us a call. The legend Dino is here, and the Neymar is here as well. Yeah, World Football phone in. The number to call if you'd like to join us is 08085 909 693. 08085 909 693. So we're talking football in North and South America, including players from over there playing in our leagues. If you'd like to join in the conversation, then feel free. First, though, 08085 909 693. 08085 909 693. But first of all, for Tim Vickery.
I don't like cricket. Oh no. I love it.
Yeah, England's Ashes Tour is officially underway with the tourists facing a Western Australia 11 at the Wacker in Perth. They've just started. England are batting. And Burnley's Charles Dagnall is there for us. We'll come on to that.
Roaring Clarence.
Yeah,
How good a season are we having?
We are coming on to that, Charles. One thing at a time.
Oh, okay. I get too excited, Dotun. No, it's this time of year.
Yeah.
It's this time of year when we intrude on your programme.
Exactly.
With cricket
and
down under.
You are most welcome, because we're going to be intruding. I'm sure you're going to be intruding for the next few weeks as well. Anyway, anyone out there yet?
Yeah. It's not been a great start, Dotun. I won't lie to you, because England in this first match, a Western Australian 11, basically Western Australia have got a shield match on at this moment in time, so it's almost like a second 11, but they do have one international player in Nathan Coulter-Nile, who's played Test cricket and one-day international cricket for Australia, and he's already taken a wicket. The second ball of the match, and Alistair Cook nicked off to the wicket-keeper, one back of a length. He just fended at it, a little bit of away movement as well, a feather of an edge through to Howe, the wicketkeeper, and so not the greatest start for Alistair Cook and for England on this tour. However, what it does do is bring in together two relatively new faces at the crease. Mark Stoneman, who opened the innings for England against the West Indies in the final three tests of the summer, and the returning James Vince, who had a fairly tough start to Test cricket. You may hear a groan from the crowd as Stoneman just nicks one short of third slip, but it just fell probably a yard or so short, and so he's fine. But so no, it's an opportunity for James Vince and Mark Stoneman to impress early on in the tour. Good pitch here at the Wacker, always quick, it's carrying through nicely, and I'm looking forward to seeing Lance Morris. Now, he's a country boy who apparently bowls very, very quickly, and so we're looking forward to seeing him. But this is a test for England. They're going to come out and try and reopen old wounds. The first runs are scored, actually, with Stoneman just cutting down towards third man, and he'll pick up two, so England 2 for 1. But they said they're going to be aggressive. They're not going to make it comfortable. They're going to try and reopen old scars from tours of the past. And so it's not started well, Dotun, but Alistair Cook has been removed. But I think you're safe to say that Cook's place is fairly cemented in this England side. It's now an opportunity for others to try and impress. Just a word, England are playing 13 in this match. There is no Stephen Finn, there is no Moeen Ali. They are going to wrap Moeen Ali in cotton wool, I think, because obviously with no Ben Stokes, Moeen's got a slight side strain. They've had previous with side strains this summer. Chris Wokes had one. It kept him out for the majority of the summer. So I think they're going to just make sure that, they're going to be very, very conservative with Moeen. He's going to play the last tour match up in Townsville before the first test again in Brisbane on the 23rd of November. As for Stephen Finn, they're going to assess him in a week. He actually did it batting. He clattered his knee with his bat, and then he stretched down to pick a ball up and just jarred it a little bit. So they're going to wait for a week to see on the fitness of Stephen Finn. So no Finn, no Moeen, and no Ben Folkes, the England reserve wicketkeeper. England
like
2 for 1.
Hang on, Charles, we haven't even mentioned Burnley yet. Here's a question.
Can we talk about Burnley now?
Yeah.
I was trying to get through all of that so we could talk about Burnley.
Well, you're there now. This is a question from Tom. It says, Sean Dyche might be off to Everton soon. Who from the panelist region should Burnley get to replace him? Now, would you like to ask that question from our North American correspondent or our South American correspondent?
North American correspondent, I think.
I don't
John.
think that's right.
John.
We don't have any managers right now who I would say I think are bound for success in the Premier League. The one who I wouldn't be surprised to see move in the near future is Patrick Vieira. Greg Vanney of Toronto's done a really nice job this year, and maybe could be a possibility as well. So those would be the only two. But I think managers here are still growing, I guess. I think that it's definitely something that could happen in the future. Maybe Mexico manager Juan Carlos Osorio, who grew up and studied watching Sir Alex and some of the other great managers in Manchester and the Premier League of that day. But he's busy now, so he's not available. So I'm not sure that my region's the right one to raid if you're going to be needing a manager in the next couple months.
So
I have
Charles,
to say, Dotun, it would be a massive eye-opener to any of those names for them to go to Burnley.
well, hold on. You don't have to stick. You don't have to stick with North America. You could twist like we did last summer, all the way to South America.
Tell you
and
what,
get...
Patrick Vieira sounds all right. I don't know if he played the brand of football that Burnley's been used to, but I don't think Sean's going to Everton. Why would he want to go to a lesser club, eh?
I'm staying out of that one, mate.
I'm in Perth. I'm 10,000 miles away from anybody, so I can say what I like out here.
Anyway, let's find out if there's any options for you in South America, Tim.
Okay.
I don't like cricket. Oh no. I love it.
Yeah, that's Tim's theme tune. Anyway.
Yeah, I can't see any South American coaches wanting to be turfing. Are you turfing? No, I can't see it. I can't see
so
it.
negative, Tim. So negative.
Tell him that.
The
What about the
law.
accent?
But Charles, I'm trying to impress you now. Two things. Firstly, I once played cricket against Vinnie Jones. We come from the same place and so on. It was just before he made it big as a footballer, and he dropped me on the easiest court and off his own bowling as well. The easiest court and bowling chance you'd ever see. I remember it because I made a few. And the other thing is that you're in the Wacker at the moment there in Western Australia. Now I'm a distant relative of Terry Alderman, the Australian, the great Australian fast medium bowler, and that was his home ground. And if I remember rightly, at one end of that ground, you get the Fremantle Doctor. The wind that comes in from Fremantle.
Look at you, Tim Vickery. Look at you.
There you go.
Well, do you know what? This is actually a novel thing, and you mentioned about that. Terry Alderman, we do commentary with Terry, and I've commentated with him before. I always like to remind him that between me and Terry, we got over 1,000 first-class wickets. Now, the fact is that Terry got 950 and I got 87. But at the Wacker, there's an enormous new purpose-built stadium that's been built. As I can see it in the distance, is a very impressive-looking thing, and it's about 60,000 capacity. But I think they're looking to move cricket to there. It won't be ready in time for the Ashes series. And so now I think cricket fans and hordes of people that will come over to Perth, especially English cricket supporters, this will probably be their last Ashes experience at this famous old ground. You talk about the Fremantle Doctor, the wind that just drifts in across the ground and helps the away swing bowlers. I mean, it's beautiful blue skies here at the moment. It is a little bit old and rustic, this ground, but it really does have a character. Grass banks on either side, these enormous concrete stanchions which hold the floodlights up. It's a fabulous place to play cricket, and arguably the quickest pitch in the world, and that was the difference that made Perth what it is. And so it is a shame that it's going to be moving to a sort of concrete arena, and that soul of Western Australian cricket is not going to be had anymore, but let's enjoy it while it lasts. But excellent knowledge from you. And who's coming to Burnley?
Well, do you know, Charles, that his family, Terry Alderman's family, they came over in '89 in the Ashes year. That was Terry Alderman's triumph there. He took, and I think my old man went to meet them. He's kind of distant cousins or something like that. And the granddad, he had to go home early because England in 1989 was too hot for him. No air conditioning, you see. No air conditioning. They don't like it up on these Aussies.
They don't.
Get them out in the sun.
Tim, can you just recommend one manager from South America for Burnley, for goodness sake?
Sorry,
all
Dom.
right, Alberto Valentin, who's with Palmeiras. Why? Because he's got lots of European experience. He played as a right back in Italy for many years, and I'm convinced that the Brazilian coaches who come into Europe and do well in Europe will be those who've played their football in Europe. Although, and he's doing quite well at Palmeiras at the moment, but I can't see him turfing in the near future.
I can't
Charles?
see him enjoying pie and chips. I mean, you've got it. That is an absolute staple. And the culinary delights. Remember when Owen Coyle used to manage Burnley? They got him promoted to the Premier League, and they made a bust of him out of crust, out of pie crust, out of pastry. They made a pastry Owen Coyle in Burnley. So if he can have the success that Coyle had, then maybe he too can be enjoyed in pastry form. But I think we'll stick to probably local managers.
Charles, what's the score at the moment now?
Oh, I've forgotten. To 4. 5. Hang on, it's 6. Now it's 6. They've just hit a 3 down towards deep square leg. James Vince is off the mark, by the way. So Vince is 3, Stoneman is 3. England have just lost Alistair Cook. They're 6-4.
Excellent commentary from Charles Dagnaville. We'll catch up with him later on for the latest from the Wacker. But let's get Glenn in New England onto the World Football phone now. Glenn, good morning.
Hello, Don. How you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks very much. You've got a question for the Legendino, I see.
I do, yes.
Go ahead.
Hello, Tim. John. What's going on?
Hey.
Hello.
Hey. So, Tim, I know on the show previously it's been said over and over how the turnover rate for coaches in South America are pretty high. They don't last too long. However, with River Plate, the coach, Muñeco Gallardo, he's been there for a few years. As a result of winning the Copa Libertadores or Sudamericana or whatnot, he's done very well. Even though they lost this past week, they got to the semifinal. I was wondering if he plans on maybe moving to Europe to coach, kind of like Simeone. Has he had any experience playing abroad as Simeone, or does he have any ambition to maybe go to Europe or even possibly even the national team in the future? What's the deal with him?
Yeah, I think he certainly does, and I think we're coming to the end of him with River Plate. He's done very well with River Plate, and that was a humiliating defeat in the week. River Plate got themselves in a situation where second leg of a semi-final against Lanús, all Argentine semi-final, and River Plate were 3 goals up on aggregate, and with an advantage in away goals, that meant that Lanús had to score 4 goals in just over 45 minutes, and they did it. Which probably tells you that Gallardo's sides work better in attack than they do in defence. But he is an interesting coach who's developed a number of different methods of play. He's still got youth on his side. He's only just around the 40, 41 mark. And yes, he does have top-class European experience. He played in France. He played World Cups and international tournaments for Argentina. And I think his time at River Plate is coming to an end. It may even come, and this weekend on Sunday they've got Boca Juniors in the league. It might be a good game for River to have after the heartbreak of losing that lead. But if you look at the table at the moment on Boca, this is the 8th round of the championship. Boca have won all previous 7 games. River in the middle of the table, having conceded many more goals. Boca have conceded 1 goal in 19 games. So Boca are very much the form side. And to lose a Super Classic on the back of that quite humiliating elimination from the Libertadores, that could bring time on Gallardo. He's certainly, I think, has the ambition of going to Europe, but he's also been considered for the Argentina job. Now, that's just been filled, obviously, by Jorge Sampaoli. And I'd certainly imagine that Sampaoli would like to continue after the World Cup. And the only way that won't happen is if Argentina have a very, very bad World Cup. So the national team job, I think, is off for the minute, meaning that I think Europe becomes a serious. And he's already done other places in South America. He did Nacional in Uruguay. I think the time has come to go to Europe. Comparison with Simeone is, well, they're very, very different. They were very different players. And Simeone, you didn't want to mess with Simeone. And Simeone more or less invented in Argentina the idea of playing with a knife gripped between your teeth. Gallardo's teams are much more lyrical, much easier on the eye. So he's not going to have the same kind of single-minded trajectory as Simeone, but he is a coach, I think, with a lot to offer, and I think the time has come for him to go to Europe.
Good for you, Glenn.
That's good enough for me, guys.
Appreciate it. Thanks very much. Call up anytime as well. This for you, John, from Bobby. Why doesn't the MLS or MLS teams, why don't they try to raid the Irish leagues for talent?
I'm not sure.
Because Bobby's saying that it seems like it would be a cheaper way to get young talent. And is it because they wait for offers from England, or is MLS focused elsewhere?
I definitely think the focus is elsewhere. We've seen a lot of, first of all, I think especially after the U.S. failing to qualify for the World Cup, the academies and the players that MLS is producing domestically, like Tyler Adams, who we talked about earlier, Kellen Acosta from FC Dallas, who made his U.S. national team debut in the not-too-distant past and played, for most of the qualifiers in this last couple cycles. There are these players coming through, and I think you would rather have that than bring in a player from Ireland. And also, there's just been so much success in South America. Major League Soccer has been able to go to Argentina and find sort of a almost unending fountain of number 10s that I don't think America has been able to produce or develop ever, that have been very useful in MLS. And now we're seeing more players from that region come to the U.S., whether they're attacking players or not. So a lot of times we're headed to Tim's region. I think that's where the scouting, and Central America too, Saprissa, the Costa Rican giant, has lost 4 or 5 players to Major League Soccer in the past year. I think there's probably 2 or 3 more who are on their way. This offseason, Herediano is currently leading the table in Costa Rica. They're probably going to lose a player or 2 to Major League Soccer. So I definitely think the eyes are just fixed more south than on Europe.
And this is from Richard. MLS star Jack Harrison was called up again for the England under-21s. What's your opinion of him? His call-up's a good sign for the MLS?
Yeah, Harrison is in Patrick Vieira's New York City FC team. Usually plays up front, sort of wide from David Villa. Obviously, that's a pretty nice player to learn from. He had a really, really good opening year last year. He's been solid this year as well. New York City's been a good team, a fun team to watch. It's interesting. We've had people on the show before talking about English players coming to the United States and going to college. Dom Dwyer, who's now a United States international because of naturalization, was a similar example where he played in the U.S. college system and then sort of ended up bursting onto the scene here and becoming a fixture, and now he's a U.S. international. So, I think it's a good sign that these players are getting call-ups. I think you're going to see it more and more. Europeans from getting calls from the CONCACAF region. We saw it with Andre Pierre-Gignac based in Mexico at the last Euro. Sebastian Giovinco at Toronto FC getting Italy calls. David Villa even returning to the Spain side. So I definitely think you're going to see more European internationals playing in MLS, whether they're big star names or not. And I like Harrison's game a lot. I think he can provide the U21s with something good.
Yeah, and you were asking about Winston Reid earlier, weren't you, Tim? And Paul in Essex informs you that he's in the West Ham United squad for tomorrow. Confirmed.
Good sign for New Zealand.
Yeah, are you happy about that?
Yeah, I would hate a big player to miss out on a World Cup playoff because he's injured, whatever side he's on. World Cups only come around once every 4 years, so you want all of the big players and all of the teams to be there.
Absolutely.
I might be remembering this incorrectly, but I think he missed the Mexico playoff, the playoff to get to the 2014 World Cup that Mexico won over New Zealand. I think he missed that one. So it'd be a real shame if you missed 2 in a row. That you don't get many opportunities to play in games like that. So best wishes.
Yeah, this is from Alistair for both of you. We would like to know about commentary and analysis in your regions, with analysis heavy footy coverage over there in the UK. What's the style of show in your regions? Is there a mix of ex-players and journalists given the football analysis and commentary? And are there any characters of note, whether it be because of great analysis or otherwise. John, do you want to go first on that?
Well, it actually varies wildly throughout my region. In Mexico, I think you have a ton of ex-players, and everyone, I think it's a huge reason why we don't have more young Mexican managers, because it's so much easier and so much more appealing to just go on TV, make a decent salary, talk about the game, say kind of whatever you want to, generally criticize whoever the coach is, and just sort of sit back and relax instead of actually being the manager and actually taking the job. In the U.S., it's a little different. We do have some notable figures. Alexi Lawless is sort of become a provocateur in some ways, and we've seen other ex-players here too. In the United States, the game has been I don't want to say relevant, but it's been big business, I guess, for so little time that we haven't really had this sort of class, I guess, of ex-players commenting and giving their opinions. We're now starting to have that. I think Lawless is one of the first, but you're seeing other guys come through who had great or sometimes average or bad playing careers, but are able to provide something on TV. And it's interesting, I think it's something where you have to be careful, because I don't think it serves Mexico to have the constant critique. But at the same time, I think the U.S. needs a little bit more prodding and needs more of a sort of critic class if it's going to keep growing and find success in the game. And then real quick, just a country like Panama that just qualified for the World Cup, it's totally different there. There it's a very supportive, there were some tense moments when Panama looked like they might not qualify for the World Cup, but, they're wearing the Panama jersey on television. They're saying, let's go Panama. That's something in the U.S. we don't do. We have a much more measured sort of neutral approach in Panama, and a lot of the Central American countries, they're all out supporting. So it varies widely in my region, but it's definitely interesting to compare the differences.
And I imagine it's very different in South America too.
Yeah, although the journo is still king over here. It's still a domain of journalists, and journalists, their opinions are taken ridiculously seriously, myself included. I do Brazilian TV every week. My opinions over here, they're given far, far more weight than they deserve. You're just beginning to see, and that ain't false modesty. I really think that. I see people debating. Well, no, what on earth are you wasting your time debating what I think? You're beginning to see ex-players coming in, and there's plenty of strain and tension there, because some of the journos really don't like it. They're a bit worried that they're going to lose this space to ex-players, the way that it's happened in England. I actually think that a mix is quite often best. But one thing here which is really strong is the tradition of radio. Radio did so much to bed in the sport here, back in the 1920s, the 1930s, the real decade when radio became super popular over South America. And the radio tradition is so strong. And that's where the way that the commentators are so brilliant at using their voices comes from. It comes from, even if they don't work in radio, it comes from that radio tradition. Now, technology is beginning to make changes on this. The younger generation don't consume radio in the same way. You used to get, certainly, say here in Rio, in the Maracanã, used to get almost everyone, or so many people, would take a radio along and listen to the commentary of the game that they're watching. I remember there was this woman who used to sell radios, little transistor radios, outside the ground. I used to get talking to her. She would sell like 40 or 50 a game, of transistor radios. The younger generation don't do that so much. The radio tradition is weakening, I think, and TV is becoming like radio. Now, we're just like 24 hours to fill, so it's endless discussions, usually involving journalists, but increasingly ex-players. But those commentators, with the way that they use their voice, I think that still comes from the very, very strong tradition of radio.
What about this from Peter, who says, are there players from your regions who have had a great impact and or changed the way we've looked at positions in the Premier League? For example, when Eric Cantona came to the Premier League, his 9.5 position ushered him Bergkamp's and Zola's 9.5 position, says Peter in London. Do you get what he means, Tim?
Yeah, I do. I remember talking to Juninho, the little Brazilian at Middlesbrough, who came in at around mid-90s. And he talked about exactly that position. He'd been told that English football wouldn't suit him. But the thing that really surprised him was just the amount of space there was on the field, because at that time English football just played the two flat lines of four. There was no depth at all in the line, just two lines of four. So all you had to do was just stand in between those lines and you got space. And that's why Cantona was so much more successful in English football than he was elsewhere or in European games with United. It's why Nigel Clough made a career of just standing in the space between the lines. When people began to get a little bit wiser to that and close that space down, the end of, that was the end really of Nigel Clough as a really top level player. So that there are a few of them who benefited from those years when English football had just gone mad with those two flat lines of four.
God, I'm glad that you mentioned Nigel Clough there, because I always wonder why his career didn't take off. Do you remember Brian Clough, his dad, used to say that, there's bias against him because of his dad's notoriety, that's why he didn't get enough England games. But when you describe it in the way that you describe it, I totally see it now. As much as anything,
he wasn't particularly quick. So once his space was closed down, then he found it much harder to get into the game.
Interesting. We'll come back to this very question in a moment or two. 08085 909 693 if you'd like to join in the conversation on World Football Phone In. 0808 590 9693. What did I do? 08. What did you laugh at? What did I do? What? Why are they all laughing at me? What on? 08085 909 693. Why was everybody laughing? Oh, because I didn't sing the song. Okay, let me sing the song. I am a football fan. I am a soccer fan. I come to see Lineker beat the rest of the world. Is that how it goes? Thank you. Okay, let's carry on with the World Football Phone In now. And we're talking football in North and South and Central America. Pick up the phone and give us a call if you'd like to join in the fun and games, as it were. It's not all about me, for goodness sake. Tim's here. He can take the burden off me. And John's here.
I will.
And share the burden, share the burden too.
I'm going to use that last question that we had and ping it up to John a little bit. Really about those kind of number 10s or those support strikers. And John mentioned that there are loads of those from Argentina doing well in the MLS. Isn't it like a conveyor belt of them? Diego Valeri, Mauro Diaz, and so many others from Argentina have gone up there. And often, like the case of Valeri, they're players who haven't really come off in Europe. They haven't found the space to weave their magic in Europe. What does it tell us about the MLS that these players are so outstanding up there, John?
Interesting.
Well, first, I think it's just lower level, and I think we know that. It is a bit interesting because I think a lot of times MLS gets stereotyped as this physical league, right? Americans are athletic, and the referees often let play run. But you would sort of counterintuitively think that would not favor, a number 10, right, who's trying to make something happen. And if he just gets chopped down time after time, well, that's not going to be any good. So I think maybe it says a little bit about that maybe that stereotype is starting to change in Major League Soccer, that these players are able to find the success. And I think they're part of the ones changing it. With that said, I mean, you look at the most fouled, and it's always these quick, guys making plays happen, pulling the strings, and either creating a chance for usually their teammates, but sometimes themselves. And then, like in the case of Mauro Diaz, quite good at the free kick as well. So he's happy to win those and happy to take those. But I do think it's starting to change. I think it speaks to, again, the fact that America, we just don't see that. We don't have that. And I don't know that our defenders necessarily know how to cope with that. They have to figure it out. I think we have seen a drop from some of the players who have been here for a couple years as defenders start to understand what they're going to do, how they're going to attack them. But that's not the case with Valeri. He's probably going to be the most valuable player in the league this year. So when the awards come out. So I'm not sure. Like I said, I think it signals a changing MLS, but maybe also still a weakness in American domestic production that we can't produce those kind of players, and that Argentina, for some reason, is just able to send them up our way.
Yeah, look, we've got two callers in Texas with us. Jesse, who is in Houston, the home of the Astros. Jesse, good morning.
Hey, how's it going, guys? How are you?
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. I said the home of the Astros. Yeah.
The Astros, yeah.
And Trevor, who's in Conroe in Texas, will talk about baseball in a minute. Bear with us, Trevor. Let's take Jesse's call first. Go ahead. The stage is all yours, Jesse. You got a question for the Legendino, yeah?
Yes, I have a question for him. Good morning over here. Good night, good morning over there. Hope you guys are doing good.
Yeah, we're doing
I
fine.
pretty much had a...
Yeah, I was wondering, is that your little one in the background there?
Yes, she is. She just is about to turn 2 next month.
Wow.
Actually, really cool. She reminds me of when I first started listening to the program about 2 years ago. I phone in every now and then. But yeah, while I was putting her to sleep when she was younger, I would listen, put it on mute sometimes so she wouldn't wake up.
That is exactly how I discovered the World Football Phoning. Well, when it was just the World Football Conversation with Tim Vickery. It's coming up to 20 years now, and I know because
I'm excited. I'm excited for you guys.
I know
amazing.
I know exactly how old it is because one of my daughters is 19, so I have to compare it to Anyway, you got a question. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. Legendino, my question was, this World Cup, every World Cup qualifying in South America is just full of drama. It's mainly one of the reasons why I'll keep an eye on that qualifier. Because of course, I do CONCACAF. I watch it all the time. But it seems like this one has more drama. There's more ups and downs. And pretty much my question was, Chile unfortunately didn't qualify, but they had their run, their group, I could say. They had their run. What does it mean for them? Did they actually? Did you feel like they achieved something? Do they feel like they achieved something? Although they won 2 Copa Americas back to back, but they didn't qualify. What does that say about that particular group? Uruguay went to the 2010 semifinals. No more Forlan. This is probably Cavani and Suarez's last World Cup. Maybe they have one left in them. Argentina, maybe this is Messi's last run with Agüero, with Di Maria, and with these other players, Colombia, James is up and down, and Brazil seems to be a constant. You can't really question them qualifying or their skill. What do you think about the generational changes that they're going to have to go through? How is South America going to pan out for Qatar in the next 4 years?
Yeah, an interesting one. I think Chile have every right to be worried and should really be looking back and celebrating the best generation they've ever had, and the first generation that's won things. They went 99 years, and the Copa America started in 1916. And Chile had never won anything until they won it for the first time in 2015 on home ground, and then I think even better to win it on in the US a year later, the special centenary one. If you look at the history of South American football, the lesser nations, it's often been a case for them of one generation and then out. One generation and then a dip. And Peru had that wonderful generation in the 70s. As we were saying earlier on, they haven't reached the World Cup since '92. After that one generation, they found it impossible to replace them. Colombia had that generation of Valderrama in the late 80s and 90s. After that generation went, Colombia dipped, and it wasn't until the last World Cup that they came back. Paraguay had that generation that got them to the quarterfinals in 2010. They haven't been back since. So, if you look at under-20 football, under-20 football is vital here for the long-term conveyor belt of producing players for the senior side. And Chile have been poor at under-20 level. You can't at the moment see where the replacements for Alexis Sanchez and Arturo Vidal and co are coming from. Uruguay is the contrast, because Uruguay, with such a small population, just over 3 million, they keep producing. Since this coach has taken over, Tabares, it's a veteran, this is his last coaching job, which I think will end with the World Cup. But they've really put into youth development, and their under-20s have been terrific, and they keep producing players for them. And a few months ago, I was really worried about Uruguay. I thought they might not qualify. Suddenly, I'm more optimistic about them. Why is that? Because they've freshened up the side in the midfield. Up front, they've got Suarez and Cavani. As you said, this is their last World Cup at their peak. At the back, Godin and Jimenez. Jimenez is around for a while. Godin is the leader and the captain, and so that's a good defensive unit. The midfield had all aged together. The midfield is now different. They've promoted 2 players from their recent under-20 side, Valverde, who's at Real Madrid on loan to La Coruña, who looks really class, and Betancourt, who's just been bought by Juventus. And the two of them together, suddenly you're seeing what you haven't seen from Uruguay for ages, which is a midfield that can retain the ball and can support the strikers better. So rather than a kind of 8-0-2 formation, you know, just everyone get behind the ball and play up to Suarez and Cavani, you're beginning to see just the bare bones of a side that might be able to do something a little bit more. So I'm becoming more optimistic about Uruguay. But anyway, the long term for Uruguay I think is not too bad because they keep producing at under 20 level. Obviously, replacing Suarez and Cavani when their time comes is going to be very, very difficult because you're talking about really world-class players with terrific scoring records. But that work that Uruguay does at under 20 level, I think will really, really stand them in good stead. And that's why Argentina have had problems recently. And Argentina, between 1995 and 2007, they kept on winning the World Under-20 Cup and they kept on producing players. Since then, their Under-20 sides have been poor and it's filtered through to the senior side. At the moment, they don't have any really top-class defenders, and maybe you'd include Otamendi as a top-class defender. He's having a good season with Man City, but I still don't think he's 100% reliable. Goalkeeper, full-backs, they're all over the place with full-backs, and this is the consequence of not carrying out good work at under 20 level, and it means that their side is increasingly dependent on flashes of individual genius from Messi. So they've got a lot of work to do before the World Cup, trying to sort out a side that isn't so dependent on Messi, because come the World Cup, the end of the season, you don't know how much gas in the tank Messi will have. As it stands now going into the World Cup, I'm optimistic about Brazil, although maybe we can get into this later in the programme. The way that Tottenham beat Real Madrid was great for me as a Tottenham fan, but worrying from a point of view of a Brazil fan. We can get into that one later if anyone wants to.
Yeah.
But Brazil are by far and away the best side going into the World Cup. Argentina and Colombia have serious work to do, and Colombia don't seem to know what they want at the moment. The coach is picking players all over the place. He doesn't seem to have a blend. Uruguay are not going to win it, but I'm more optimistic about them than I was. And Peru, well, we have to see without Paulo Guerrero if they can get past New Zealand.
Yeah, who wants to get into that conversation about how the Tottenham win over Real Madrid is worrying for Brazil? If you do, give Tim a call on 08085 909693 and we'll see what he means by that. But I suppose as well, these generational changes, and thanks for the call, Jesse, these generational changes and cycles, John, are not exclusive to South America, of course, and you've talked about how the USA team in particular, after not reaching the World Cup final this year, has got to sit down and reevaluate. Is part of that reevaluation about generational changes and youth team development and that kind of thing as well?
Well, definitely. I mean, I think it's sort of that they missed the boat, or there's a lot of veteran players who I think are still, playing well. Clint Dempsey had a great night last night in MLS playoffs. It would have been nice to see him at the World Cup once more. And then you have young players like Christian Pulisic, Ethan Tyler Adams, Kellen Acosta, Paul Arriola, these guys who we've talked about and have already most of them done well on the international stage, but there was nothing in the middle. We didn't have that U20 focus that Tim mentioned. We didn't have success at the youth level, and I think it came back to haunt the U.S. You look at generational change in CONCACAF, and Panama is a perfect example. They're going to the World Cup for the first time. It's a great story, and yes, I'll be able to tell you about it if you're watching BBC Wales. But it's several guys who are in their mid-30s. This was their last chance. They made the World Cup. Now the question after they, enjoy this time, because it's the first time, it's going to be a party even if they don't do very well. Then comes the questions of what do we do next? Those are the questions that some of the teams Tim mentioned in South America are facing, and they're going to have to confront it as well.
BBC Wales?
Yeah, that's the work Tim sent me. I'm cutting you in 10%.
BBC Wales get to see that.
It's Wales against Panama. Yeah.
Oh, I suppose.
It's probably available on a red button or a green button or an indigo button.
Yeah, I don't know how it all works.
Yeah. Are you going to do the commentary then?
No. They're just some background. I don't know. Okay. No. I won't be on live. I'll just be. I'm not really sure what's happening, but I'm giving some background info.
But you'll be the Tim Vickery of BBC Wales, basically.
Oh well, I don't know about that, but something like that.
Yeah, something like that. We've got Trevor.
Only with a beard.
I actually trimmed it into a mustache for my Halloween costume, and it doesn't look as bad as I was expecting. I was thinking it was going to be a quite horrific, but it was fine.
You have got to tweet that photograph. Anyway, Trevor is with us in Conroe, in Texas, Trevor, yeah?
Yes, sir, that's right. Last week, Tim was talking about how he was reading a book about American baseball and how they had just made up this myth that the baseball was invented in Cooperstown, New York.
Oh, yeah.
And the whole reason, the reason was Cooperstown was coming out of the Great Depression, and this guy thought it was a great way to get tourists, and he ended up being right. And ironically, like Derby, the baseball ground existed years before Cooperstown ever did. But speaking of baseball Hall of Fames or Hall of Fames in general, I was going to ask Tim, is there anything comparatively in Brazil, kind of a Brazilian Hall of Fame? And for Jon, ironically, there was a soccer Hall of Fame not too far from Cooperstown in a town called maybe Oneata or something similar to that, but then it went bankrupt and is now moving to a suburb of Dallas called Frisco. And I was wondering the thought process of why it was moved there.
Should we take Jon first on that one? Trevor, thanks for the call. Jon?
Yeah, so it'll be part of the stadium where FC Dallas, the MLS team here in my area, plays currently, and they're building it. It's in process. My understanding is the reason why it's going to be there is because essentially no one was willing to put the time, effort, and money, I think money probably being the big one, into an actual physical building to hold everything, sort of have an actual Hall of Fame experience like they do in Cooperstown, like they do with hockey in Toronto. And so the Hunt family who owns FC Dallas, again, my understanding is they said, hey, we want it. And they sort of ended up with it. So we'll see how the exhibits and everything look. I think it's going to be nice. The renderings look good. I do wonder if it's going to be a destination for soccer fans. I also been to the FIFA Hall of Fame in Pachuca in Mexico, one of the sort of very near the site of where the first match apparently was played in North America. Although, again, I don't know if that's sort of a tale like the Cooperstown tale, but I think it is true in a small town outside of Pachuca. It's well done, but again, it's sort of weird because it's not super on the map. But they do get people. They induct a class every year of players and coaches, and sometimes they show up and. There's the pictures to prove it. If you're ever in Pachuca, it's a really nice visit. But yeah, sort of off the grid. So maybe that will be similar to Frisco in some ways, or maybe they'll be able to make such a phenomenal venue that people will come around from all over. We'll have to wait and see.
Jim?
I've just learnt where Frisco is. I'm very, very happy with that. I remember watching a game. It was a friendly and I thought it had Frisco there, and I thought, is that just short for San Francisco, or is it a different place? And now I've learned it's on the outskirts of Dallas. So I'm very happy with a little bit of knowledge.
I've told you can't call San Francisco Frisco except in the movies.
No.
No.
But to answer the question, that kind of specifically that Hall of Fame thing is very, very North American. We don't really have that here, and also we don't have the same kind of valuation of the past. It doesn't do that very well. Starting to change. There's a football museum now in Sao Paulo, in the municipal stadium, very well located in the Pacaembu, near the centre of Sao Paulo. I don't live in Sao Paulo. I haven't been to the museum, but people who have tell me that it's very good and it's very well done. But this is quite new, and this kind of generation of tradition and value of tradition that the North Americans seem to do so well and so naturally is not really something that works anything like as well down here, unfortunately.
Yeah, do you remember when there was that artist that called up and asked you? No, it wasn't called up. Sent an email, asked you to suggest a match that they could do. Yeah, he did a really good one actually. I forgot to mention it a couple of weeks back. Anyway, he sent a collage inspired by the World Football Phone-In now, which I'll retweet. Very shortly. I'll retweet it now, why don't I? But he's also sent another drawing or painting, is it, of a Sunderland fan watching a football match. It's pretty good, actually. They're both good. If you're on my Twitter feed, you'll get it. You'll find it just now, so I've just tweeted it. Anyway, this question for Jon, actually. Interesting one for you, Jon. Having lived... we've got so many calls and texts and emails from Texas this morning, which is reassuring. I'm sure it's because of our Texas connection. Jake, who's in Texas, says, having lived in Dallas for many years and made many friends who love soccer, I was amazed very few followed MLS. A lot of them were put off by the American sports model, the salary cap, no promotion and relegation being applied to soccer. Do you think, in hindsight, MLS should have followed the traditional soccer structure from the beginning in 1996 in order to capture established soccer fans in the USA, rather than trying to make soccer fans out of the traditional American sports fans, if you see what I mean?
I do see what you mean, and I understand that perspective, and I think it is an interesting viewpoint. But I think if that was what the approach taken, especially in 1996, when you look at the stories, the finances, everything that went into starting the league and how close the league was to failure, I'm not sure that we'd be talking about Major League Soccer if that was the model they started with. The finances in the U.S. still in soccer, you look at some of the lower divisions, teams having difficulty in folding. In some ways, you can't definitively say, because they say, oh, well, if we had the chance of promotion, then we would be fine and we would make money, which we can't know unless it happens. So it's difficult to prove hypothetical, right? But some of the teams have come and clearly not had success. Some have, and it's been great. I think the interest has grown. I think it's coming along slowly, and I understand that there are definitely sort of old school soccer heads who have been fans of the game for much longer than MLS has been around, who remember the NASL days, the original NASL days, and who haven't embraced MLS, and I think that's fine. I wish they could kind of be welcomed into part of the community. If there are changes that can be made to this current MLS structure, I think that's worth being explored. But I just think soccer needed to be sort of helped along and marketed correctly and aided and sort of have some financial footing before we even start to think about some of those things like a promotion relegation system and that sort of thing. I think it's, maybe now we're at that point where we can have those discussions. But I think before, getting off the ground, you weren't going to get the owners to invest the money, the capital that was needed without a salary cap, without pretty strict roster, restrictions that are now being eased. It just wasn't going to happen.
We haven't had one of these for a while. David in Neath wants to know whatever happened to Freddie Adu.
He was actually on the field the other day for a DC United sort of alumni game because they're moving away from RFK Stadium, historic stadium that's hosted a lot of U.S. games as well, hosted DC United. They're moving to a soccer-specific facility that's going to be great for them. But, RFK, there were a lot of memories there. Freddie was on the pitch. He had a trial with an MLS team before the season. I've heard that he's had offers in various places. But, after some difficult times, I think, moving abroad, sometimes not getting paid, sometimes just not enjoying his life there, he just hasn't taken those opportunities that I know. I think he would still play. He's not, I think he's still 29 or 30. So, you could still catch on and play a year or two, but he's not with a current team right now. We'll see if he gets anything maybe in the MLS preseason, if he can catch on somewhere, or if that's even interesting to him. I think he's a situation where he got a lot of hype. He didn't have a lot of great advice, and frankly, American soccer had never had a commodity like him or had a player like him who was able to do the things he was able to do at the young age. Definitely the hype had something to do with it, but I'm also not entirely sure that was everything. So anyway, we'll see if he can catch on again, but it's sort of a cautionary tale that will, unfortunately, I think always be repeated in U.S. soccer circles when we have a promising young player, because it just never worked out.
Do you know, our editor tonight says, I cannot begin to tell you how excited I am to be producing the World Football Phone-In for the first time in 3 years. I'm a football fan. I'm a soccer fan. Do you think he's trying to get a Brazilian shirt name or something like that, Tim?
He's in the queue behind Anand.
Well, yeah, and there's a queue behind Anand before it gets to our editors tonight, I can tell you that. So, anyway, the question for both of you. Damien says, for John, first of all, what will Kaká's legacy be within MLS? And also to Tim, do you think he'll go back to Brazil and join one of the big clubs after the MLS?
I can do that in a word. Probably yes. That's 2 words,
Yes.
I know. No,
Okay.
leave the field to John.
Probably yes. Why don't you just take out the probably and it'll still be a word? Okay. John?
I'm not sure. Legacy. I think he'll be remembered fondly.
That's about 14 words already. Can't you just at least...
Oh, sorry. I didn't know I was supposed to go one word. If I have to go one word, I would say fine. You know, it wasn't... His career wasn't remarkable. He was never able to get Orlando City into the playoffs. And this year, quite frankly, he was a detriment to the team. They were better when he was not on the field than when he was on it. And that's never something you want to say about any player, much less one that had as beautiful of his career, as wonderful of moments as Kaká did. I think he, was one of those players who did lend MLS maybe a little bit of international cachet. When you look at, and Tim would have to say if there was any uptick in interest in the Brazilian market, or, if it maybe made it the newspaper's 9th page or what have you, here's what Kaká did today. But when you look at sort of where he'll be in the legacy of players who were famous in Europe and then signed in MLS, he's sort of well down the list as far as his influence on the playing field.
I am a football fan. I am a Charlton supporter, says Danny. Can you think of any player from either of your regions that would suit Charlton and help us get promotion? Who's laughing?
It's me. I have no idea what Charlton needs. You're going to have to give us a little help.
It's not a laughing matter. This is
Lionel
serious.
Messi. Well, he'd be great. He'd fit in there. He'd love it.
For me.
Don't do it. Don't do it, Tim. That's just taking a mickey now. It's a serious question. A serious question from Dan.
He's climbed the hills. Why doesn't he want to go down into the valleys as well?
Well, you'd have to go down 2 divisions down into the valley as well nowadays, unfortunately. But, somebody on our level, serious contenders, please, only. Perhaps a young player. Actually, we've got a few decent young players. We've got some real kind of skills there at the moment. We've got, some players who have got some, some dribbling skills and everything like that as well. So
you need a forward players to put it in. You got those guys. You need someone to finish it off.
I think we need a good striker. We've got a couple of guys. We've got a couple of big guys as well, by the way. But I think we need a good, proven number 9. Got a half decent goalkeeper. Defenders, I wouldn't like to criticise anybody, actually, because the last match I saw of Charlton, they were really good. So got about a handful of creative players. So who would we want? A couple of decent wingers, actually, they weren't bad. Wingers weren't bad either,
Well, the fellow I'm going to send along to you is a Colombian called Wilmar Barrios, who plays for Boca Juniors.
Yeah.
We mentioned earlier on that Boca Juniors in 7 games only conceded 1 goal. And he's got a lot to do with that. He's a defensive midfielder. He's only a little fella. But if he stands on a nail, that nail gets flattened. You know what I mean? You don't want to mess with him.
Yeah, I like it.
And he's tough, and he can play. He reminds me a little bit of a young Javier Mascherano.
An enforcer, a bit of an enforcer.
Yes.
Right,
yes.
okay, yeah, we
a
could
little
do
bit of an
with
enforcer.
That.
He's quick around the field as well, and you can just see him bolstering any side. So I'll have a word and see if we can send him along.
Okay, how much do you think he'd cost out of interest?
Thrupney halfpence or whatever it is. No, I don't know.
We might struggle with that. We might struggle with
that. More than half a sixpence.
Okay, then. Same thing, isn't it? Same flipping thing, as far as I remember. Anyway, okay, how about from North America? Any suggestions?
Well, I'm not sure you can afford him either, because he's been one of the best Mexican players for a while in the domestic league, in Liga MX. So often the league's dominated by Argentines, Colombians, Brazilians, players from Ecuador. But this year, Victor Guzman from Pachuca scored 8 goals. He's also created several more. You're going to get to see him at the Club World Cup when Pachuca's there in December. He's only 22. Pachuca's known for developing talents, but he actually, has a history of in the Mexican youth system. Was supposed to be a big key player in the Olympics and then took an injury. So we'll see if he can help you out. I think create some goals, score some goals for you, and there we go.
Is the enforcer type player, is that a common or a used asset in Major League Soccer, the kind of like hard nut?
Yes. I mean, like I said, I think it's changing a bit, but I think it definitely helps you if you have a big And it doesn't even have to be big in Major League Soccer. I think the big thing is just you need a player in front of your back line who can recover the ball and win the ball back, right? Get possession quickly. When you lose possession, he's right there to win it back. There's an Ecuador international, Carlos Grezzo, that plays to my local team, FC Dallas, who I think is very good at this. He had a stint in Germany. I wouldn't be surprised if he's back in Europe sooner rather than later, because even though he's not a big player, he's a physical player, and he's very good at recovering the ball. So the enforcer type definitely can find success at MLS.
And just finally, how about a sweeper? I think we could do with a sweeper. Somebody to distribute the ball evenly all across the pitch. Anybody from MLS?
From MLS, you can't afford Grezzo either. I think he'd be a good player for you.
Look, I'll tell you who we can afford and who can't afford. Just give me the player now. Or as Biggie would say, give me the loot, give me the loot.
I say Grezzo kills two birds with one stone for you there.
Okay, I like it. I like that. Kills two birds with one stone. How about South America?
If you had Grezzo and Barrios together, you know that's your Charlton thin red line. You know, not a lot of people are going to get past that.
Okay,
so buy them both.
We'll
see
buy
if you
them
can
both.
get kind of two for the price of one deal.
Well, see if we get promotion is the main thing. And Cleo in Hampshire's with us. Good morning, Cleo.
Good morning, Dotun. Good morning, John. Good morning, Tim.
Gosh, your lot have got a date with destiny later on today, haven't you? A proper date
Talking
with
about
destiny.
20 years. Next year is 20 years since I went to watch Jamaica versus Argentina in the World Cup. What a match.
Wow.
I went to see them.
Saw Batistuta score a hat-trick. Unbelievable. And I was reading an article about him, how much pain and distress he's gone through with his ankle and his knee. He plays polo now and farms cattle, but what a player.
Yeah, it was brilliant.
And I believe one of his sons plays for Roma. I was watching them beat Chelsea the other night. I don't know if that's true or not. Anyway, my question for Tim is about Brazil, 10 days' time. Mr. Southgate's got some youngsters in. What youngsters we got winning the Under-20 World Cup, Under-17 last Saturday? Watch it on BBC too.
Yeah, we talked about it last week. Yeah, we talked about it.
It was brilliant. It comes down for 2-0 down to win 5-2. Brazil got third place and Golden Glove and fair play, so they can't be that bad. What sort of team is Brazil going to put out in 10 days' time, Tim? And for John, what's happened to Beckham and that Miami franchise is supposed to have got?
We'll come on to that in a moment. I've been wondering about that as well. I'm glad you asked that, Claire. We'll come on to that in a moment. But first, Tim, what kind of a team will Brazil put out?
A strong one. There aren't that many games before the World Cup. And they play Japan in Lille and then come to England to play at Wembley, and these are quite important games for them. I think especially the England one. Brazil have cleaned up in South America, and they've done it in real style since the new coach took over. However, the competition hasn't been great. It's not the greatest crop of South American sides. They need practice against other schools of play, and here we get into the problems of that Tottenham win against Real Madrid at Wembley. One is Marcelo, the attacking left back. Great attacking left back, no doubt about it, but he can't be in two places at once, so there is space behind him if he goes forward, and he's not the greatest defender. Same is true for the other fullback, Daniel Alves. Not the greatest defender. Doesn't really like doing a lot of defending. He's much more of a fullback who wants to get in the final third of the field. Now, if England can get sustained possession in midfield, can they get in behind the fullbacks? England against Brazil at under-17 level, they had real joy there, getting behind Brazil's attacking fullbacks. And the other worrying thing from that Tottenham-Real Madrid game is the fella at Real Madrid who's supposed to balance the team out, and usually does, is Casemiro of Brazil, who has become such an important player for club and country. My God, he looked like he was running through treacle. He was so slow. So that's a worry. And it's no coincidence, I think, that when Brazil's coach, Tite, when he named the squad, and usually plays a 4-1-4-1 with Casemiro on his own, and then a line of four ahead of him, and then Gabriel Jesus as a striker. The coach said, well, one thing that we might have a look at is Fernandinho together with Casemiro. Now, Fernandinho of Man City has been Casemiro's reserve, but you can see a lot of sense in the idea of trying the two together. giving them a little bit more solidity in central midfield, and that should allow the fullbacks to push up without worrying so much about the space behind them, because either Fernandinho on one side or Casemiro the other perhaps can protect that. So that's something I think to look out for when Brazil come to Wembley. Will they line up in their traditional 4-1-4-1, or will they think, no, against the top sides in the World Cup, against the Spains and the Germanys and the Frances and so on, we're going to need to be a little bit tighter. So will they play both Fernandinho and Casemiro together? That, I think, is the key thing to look for the England game at Wembley.
And Johnny, whatever happened to Beckham's MLS franchise?
Well, they ran into a couple different difficulties. I think the biggest one, maybe you could even say the only one, is they can't find a place to put a stadium. Major League Soccer won't give you a team or sort of move forward with a franchise until you have a place to play. It's been so key for so many markets to have a well-located stadium, easily accessible, hopefully by public transportation. And I think when they announced the team, Beckham thought he had a site right on near where the cruise ships leave in Miami, and then the cruise ship industry said, nah, that's not happening. We don't want more traffic. We don't want more cars. We don't want more difficulties. They found another site. That was a no-go as well. They finally have a place in a neighborhood called Overtown that they think they're going to be able to build a stadium on, and I believe they might even own all the land now, but it's a little complicated with who owns what. The city owns this. They can sell it this amount, or they can't sell it this amount. So MLS has said they might have some movement on this in the off season. They're going to sort of announce the expansion plans, because expansion is a huge thing. That's the other thing that's happened here, is that there are a lot of cities that want MLS teams, a lot of ownership groups in different cities that want to bring Major League Soccer to their city. And so I think in some ways, while when it was announced, MLS desperately wanted to be in Miami, now I think they might be asking, is this really worth the trouble? Is this really worth the cost, the hassle? Because it has been a hassle. They've run into government issues about spending. And to bring it back to baseball, oddly enough, the Miami Marlins, the baseball team there, sort of fleeced the city. They got tons and tons of money from the city to build Marlins Park, the stadium, and then sort of ran out on it. So the city is not in a place where the residents want to give public funding for a stadium, to give tax breaks for a stadium, et cetera. So I think all these things have sort of come together, and it's almost become not a joke, but sort of a punchline in a way of Major League Soccer fans that this thing might not happen. That'll happen when there's a team in Miami. There are other markets that have emerged. I think the MLS still wants to be there. I think Beckham still would like to be involved, and MLS would like to have him. But in some ways, it might just be easier to pick a couple other cities that are, have a clear plan, that have land for a stadium, and let it roll. So it's a big question as to whether there's actually going to be an MLS team in Miami.
Might it be easier for David Beckham to just put together a consortium to buy an existing franchise?
I don't know that he'd have any interest in that. I mean, I think he wants the creative control, the direction. He wants to be able to sort of the thing about Beckham in Miami is it's so sexy. It's so international. It's, with his name attached to it, it can draw players. It's Miami. It has this reputation, probably well-deserved for being, beautiful, a party town. South Americans love visiting there. So I think he would like to be there. He did help the Oakland Raiders, the NFL team, move to Las Vegas. And there was some thought that, hey, maybe he's going to pick up stakes from Miami and try and put a team in Vegas. So it's all very much in progress to be determined.
Because he would have got the land, wouldn't he, in Vegas? There wouldn't have been a problem.
Well, there's plenty of space out there.
Exactly.
I mean, there's plenty of space out there. And if he sort of helped coax the NFL team there, maybe you just share the same stadium. You design it to have some features specifically for American football, but some features also for a Major League Soccer team. It's all very much up in the air. Like I said, I think MLS still wants to be in Miami, but I also wonder if there's a bit of fatigue there. They've been trying to get this thing there for years, and it hasn't happened. They said they'd be starting play, I think, in 2018. That's not going to happen. I think it's 2020 at the earliest, and that doesn't look like too great either. So we'll see.
And is that a pig I see flying outside your window? Anyway,
I'm skeptical. But I didn't think Atlanta would work, and it was a phenomenal first season for Atlanta. The city fell in love with them. The stadium wasn't a big question, although they are playing in an NFL facility, but they've made it their own, and it's worked out perfectly. So as skeptical as I am that we'll ever see a team, as skeptical as I am that we'll see David Beckham, cutting a huge ribbon at a beautiful new soccer-specific facility in Overtown, it still is within the realm of possibility. I've been wrong before, and happily so.
Yeah, James.
In the case of Atlanta, John, how important was the style of the team and the flair players that they went with, and how much of an impact did that have in getting fans to rally to the cause?
It certainly didn't hurt. You look at the South American imports. It's funny because Trinidad and Tobago International, Kenwyn Jones, was one of the first signings for the team. And then they signed Tata Martino as the manager. Well, obviously, Jones doesn't really fit with what Tata wants to do on the field. Then the players they brought in are these exciting young players who connected with the community. And Miguel Almiron, Josef Martinez, Villalba from Argentina, who was on loan at Tijuana as well. These players played a beautiful style, a fun style. I think it might have caught up with them at the end because I'm not sure they were equipped for, sort of the grueling nature of a playoff run where games come fast and furious. But it didn't hurt anything at all that Atlanta was a fun team to watch. As I mentioned earlier, their marketing as well was also top notch. And when you go to the stadium, I was at the first game that they had there in the new facility. It's beautiful, but they don't feel at all like second-class citizens. A lot of times you go to a stadium where a team shares with an NFL team or with another team of any kind, and their logo is plastered all over the place. The MLS team is an afterthought. It's built with both teams very much in mind, and it's an Atlanta United home stadium as much as it's an Atlanta Falcons stadium. So I think the style of play definitely helped. The imports helped. Martino's willingness to sort of be in the community has helped, but the marketing and location also were enormous factors in that team succeeding. I don't know if Miami can replicate it. I think it's going to be a very difficult mix to find if Miami does end up having a team.
Question of the night from Paddy in Poplar. Frisco. Do you think this Dallas suburb was the Frisco that Chic were referring to in their
Sister
classic...
Sledge? He's the greatest dancer, and I've been thinking of the same thing, and I'm thinking, no, please, just control.
Sledge.
Don't do it. Don't do it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the same thing. It's Rodgers and Edwards. Don't go there. Discipline. For once in your life, for crying out loud, show some discipline. So I didn't do it, but I'm afraid that Paddy in Poplar has forced me there.
Well, clearly you're saying that...
One night in a disco on the outskirts of Frisco. I was cruising with my favourite gang. There you go.
Clearly you're trying to say that I'm indisciplined, aren't you? Anyway, we'll put that to one side.
The night was so boring, filled with out-of-towners touring. I always thought that was hard, because I love the record, but I always thought that was prejudice against out-of-town. What's wrong with out-of-towners touring? What's wrong with it?
By the way, in case anybody asks, no, Boy George didn't come round my house this week. He was supposed to, but he didn't come round my house. Not yet, anyway. Maybe there's still time. Anyway, James in Haywards Heath says...
Do you really want to hurt him?
Not if I remember what the story in the song was about. No, I don't. Anyway, James in Haywards Heath says, what do you think will be the outcome of the lawsuit NASL have against USSF? Any chance NASL will get the result they want? You might want to tell us what those acronyms actually mean.
Well, it's the U.S. Soccer Federation, and it's NASL, the currently one of two second divisions in the United States pyramid. Honestly, I haven't been tracking this as closely as I probably should have. I saw today some rumors that the U.S. Soccer Federation won its case, but I'm not sure. I can't speak educatedly on this. Unfortunately, there's been too much else going on. I've spoken many times on the show before that I want NASL to succeed. I want USL to succeed. That's the other minor league, I guess you'd call it, or second division in the United States. NASL, I think, wants to sort of forge ahead with a model that sort of doesn't have MLS as sort of the crown jewel. But again, I may be mischaracterizing things. It's all very convoluted, and I'm not a legal expert. There have been some really good pieces on it by people who are legal experts who have been following more closely than me, and I'll try and retweet those on Twitter. So if people are interested, they can check those out. But I can't really speak too educatedly about it.
Tim, Ryland wants to know if Jimmy Hogan ever coached in Latin America. Do you know?
No, not I'm aware of. That's another one with a great Burnley connection. Jimmy Hogan, wonderful coach from English football. who took good passing the ball on the ground football to Hungary and was Hungary's guest of honour when they came to Wembley in 1953 and wiped the floor with England. No, I don't think he ever came to Latin America, although quite a few Hungarians did. And Jimmy Hogan there was right at the birth of the great days of Hungarian football and did so much to take Hungarian football up to that level. And many people who were influenced by him did come to South America to coach, but I don't think he did, no.
A couple of people, not a couple actually, about 4 or 5 people have asked about Bonatina of Wolves, top goal scorer in the Championship. He's from Brazil, obviously. That's from Edward. Chris says... Yeah. Can Tim tell us anything about Leo Bonatini of Wolves? He seems like a quality player, and I'm amazed he slipped under the radar of the big clubs.
Yeah, and I don't know a lot about him because he doesn't really have much of a history here. And I think he was with Cruzeiro, who are a big club, but didn't make the grade, and is one who's gone abroad and has made his career abroad. He's just beginning to be picked up by the local media, just beginning to notice what he's doing there with Wolves, and it'd be fascinating to see where he can go and where he can take them.
Yeah, Ken says listening in Houston. I tell you, a lot of people listening in Houston or in Texas tonight, don't I? Yeah, Texas. Listening in Houston. Freddie Adu and Beckham's Miami MLS in the same 20-minute slot. Well done. The MLS has a foothold finally in the US. Now needs to grow into recognisable and competitive structure. But you don't agree?
No, I do agree. I don't think recognizable and competitive has to be just like Europe does it. I mean, I think Liga MX is recognizable and competitive, but has 2 short tournaments. They promote one team and relegate one team a year. I mean, I think too often we look to Europe and yes, the best, as Tim says, Champions League is the level. The international teams, when you look at the championships they've won, are the level. Okay. The history is there for sure. But I think too often we look and we say, oh, yeah, we should just do that. It's not a paint-by-numbers, one-size-fits-all situation. Sometimes I think American solutions are better.
This is a question from our listeners. Sorry that I've mislaid the name. But anyway, a question for John. Orlando City striker Kyle Larin recently declared his interest in going to Europe. Is he good enough? Where will he end up, do you reckon?
He's been linked with Anderlecht, and I think that would actually be a good sort of intermediary step for him. I worry that he might sort of, I think a jump to one of the top teams maybe be a little too much for him, but I think he could certainly have a nice campaign or two in Belgium, and then maybe go into. I wouldn't mind seeing him in the league. Actually, I wonder if that might. I don't know. Premier League fit isn't horrible either. He's a good goal scorer, gets into the box well. Had a couple disciplinary issues this year that I don't love, but I think he's a good player for Canada, would definitely succeed in Europe in one of the mid-tier leagues, and maybe that could launch him into one of the top tiers.
Yeah, what more can you tell us about him? Why is he being noticed at the moment?
Well, he's on that Orlando City team that Kaká was on. He's been the top scorer there for the last several years. He's been playing for Canada since he was young. He went to UConn, actually, and was drafted out of there into Major League Soccer. He was sort of the clear, I felt at least that year, the best forward that had been in college, and he's found success in MLS. I don't know. I think his finishing is, he's a good finisher, but I think he could still improve it. And I think that's maybe what a stopover would do in one of the mid-tier leagues.
And Tim, Rari in Barcelona wants to know if you think that the success of strikers for Atletico Madrid. Oh, by the way, he's writing an article for an independent football website about Atletico Madrid. He says the production line of strikers there over the past 10 to 12 years. Do you think it's the success of people like Falcao, Costa, Griezmann, Forlan, Aguero in Atletico Madrid? Is it to do with the South American flair that they've done so well there, the trust put in these players, or is he missing something else?
Well, Simeone always says that, and he was successful with Atletico Madrid as a player before taking over as a coach, and he always says that the club has an identity, and the identity it's a South American identity there, but it's also a counter-attacking identity. So it's a model of play that they've so often had, where you've got space to burst into. And another one to add on to the list, Angel Correa, who is just beginning to get going with them, but could be a very special player in his own right.
And by the way, he also says, long-time listener of the show since 2007, it goes without saying, love you guys' work. For John...
I'm afraid we're going to have to take away Anand's right to a Brazilian shirt name. Anand just put on Twitter that Jimmy Hogan was a Scot, which is not true. He's Lancashire, he's from near Burnley.
Anand, so close, Anand. This is my Burnley accent. So close. I'm trying to be like Tim Vickery talking.
You can't have him.
Yeah, the Nigerian from Burnley. That's what I'm at.
He was named Scottish, so he does nay qualify as a Scot.
He probably was a Nigerian. Very quickly, John, Osorio really the best option for US going forward?
Maybe. We have so much time. There's no need to name anyone now. I'm sure the US can find someone.
But Osorio, yes or no?
I mean, I think he'd be great, but who knows if he'll even be available.
And that's a yes, is it?
Sure.
Oh, got there in the end. In just a word, Tim, learn from him. Thanks very much, Tim. Thanks, John.
BBC 5 Live.